Tonight, we interrupt your regularly scheduled O.M.A.C issue for a story about some talking animals. Hawk and Dove decides to spend its last two issues testing my patience, and Nocenti is writing Green Arrow now. Someone please shoot me. All that and more this week on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 27 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and hey, we made it 6 months. Like officially, we've been through 6 months of this show and that's a nice little milestone to celebrate, but I'll have to celebrate some other time because this episode is a doozy. We have 15 comics to talk about and all of them I have very strong opinions on. So let's see what we got. We have the number 7 issues of Detective Comics, Batwing, Action Comics, Red Lanterns, Green Arrow, Justice League International, Men of War, O.M.A.C, Stormwatch, Hawk and Dove, Static Shock, Animal Man, and Swamp Thing. Additionally, we have the number 6 issue, aka the final part, of Huntress, and the number 1 issue of a new miniseries called Night Force, which is very confusing and I'm not sure I quite understand what's going on in it yet. However, I have given myself about a minute to talk before we get into the comics, and that minute is wrapping up in about 5 seconds, so let's get into the first comic of the week. Detective Comics number 7, written and art by Tony S. Daniels. The last issue left off with Batman finding that Snakeskin had attacked and possibly killed Charlotte, Bruce Wayne's girlfriend, kinda, and then they drop them into some weird ice pit thing. Sure. So this issue opens up with Jill, Charlotte's sister, with the eye patch and is all evil and stuff, beating up Snakeskin because he killed her sister, and he basically is like, hey, baby, I understand you're angry. I get that, but you know it had to happen eventually. And she's like, well, that's up to me. I should be able to decide that. And he's like, all right, so are we cool? And she just goes, yeah. And then they continue on with their plan, their very secretive plan. So then we cut back to, I guess the ice pit was the ice generator, which, sure, yeah, I guess you need an ice generator in a giant iceberg lounge. And so Batman and Charlotte are in there, and they are dangling by a wire, and Batman calls Alfred saying how he needs the bat sub sent to his location immediately, and Alfred's like, are you sure you're still inside? And he's like, do it. And as he's about to drop, the bat sub comes in and just explodes through the wall, and they're able to get out. So Batman then tells Alfred to put Charlotte on ice because she's still alive and they can save her. So then we cut back to Jill and Snakeskin, and apparently they've got plastic guns so that they can get through security, or at least Snakeskin does. And Jill gets a look at Snakeskin, and I guess his power is being able to change his face however he wants, but it ain't working, and he just looks like a monster right now. And she's like, this isn't going to work if you can't blend in the crowd. He's like, look, we're already too far into this. We just got to finish up the plan as best we can. She's like, all right, well, good luck. I'll take care of my end. So then he makes off for the iceberg lounge. We see Penguin overlooking the crowds of people and seeing all the villains around him who have invested their money to be safe with Penguin. And they heard the explosion of Batman crashing to Subban, and they're like, excuse me, was that an explosion? He's like, nah, we're fine. And then one of his assistants comes up and says, excuse me, sir, there's been a bomb threat at the casino. And she's like, yeah, no, everything's still fine. We're all good. And everyone's like, okay, maybe we should get in a bunker or something. It's like, no. I'm protecting your money. You guys are up on your own. He's like, all right, I'm getting pretty sick of Penguin now. So then we cut back to Batman on the boat. He's managed to get Charlotte out of intensive care. She's stable, And apparently he's the one who called the bomb threat at the Iceberg Lounge to get the police here as fast as humanly possible. But then he goes back in and he starts reminiscing like, of course, here's what all of this must mean. And apparently the person he was chasing like 2 issues ago was actually Jill, and the person who killed the guy who was like running the crime, like the laundering thing, was also Jill. And she's just able to put this all together. And he just knows that it's Charlotte's long-lost sister as well. And I'm like... He says it like it's obvious, and I'm like, was it, though? I feel like Snakeskin would be the more obvious pick there, but whatever. So, we see Jill has made her way down into the vaults, and she is using some weird cybernetic something or another to get in. Meanwhile, Snakeskin is making his way to Penguin, and as he's making his way down into a bunker for safety... he confronts him, pulls out a gun, goes to shoot Penguin, and it backfires, and it blows up his own hand. And Penguin's like, see, this guy tried to kill me. All right, we're leaving now. And as he tries to do so, all the villains come up together and like, hey, look, we're backing out of our deal. We want our money back. Bye. We're done. So then we cut back to Jill, and Batman is confronting her as she's getting something out of some vaults. And she just, justifies herself. She's like, I made a promise to never be anyone's victim and blah, blah, blah. But then as she's being attacked by Batman, all those, like, D-list villains show up, and they're like, Batman, we'll take care of her ourselves because that was our money she was planning on stealing. And then Batman's like, no, I'm not letting you take her either. She will face the law or whatever. And so Batman just starts blasting through all these D-list villains like they were absolutely nothing. And he tells them, like, hey, you honestly think Penguin would want to help you? Like, you guys are his competition. He's taking your money and playing you for fools. And he's probably going to kill you. And Mr. Combustible's like, wait, yep, I can sense that there's explosions nearby or explosives. And Batman's like, yeah, no, he's probably going to kill you. And then the explosives go off in the vault. So then we see Jill, who got away during the fight, goes and talks to Penguin, and apparently it was all part of their plan. Everything that's happened, they had this double-cross thing where she would help him take out all of those D-list villains and get their money, and in return, she would make it look like he was just an innocent bystander in the whole thing because Snakeskin was going to kill him as well. But all Jill wants in return is for her father and Charlotte's father, Mayor Haiti, to get a sizable contribution to his campaign to be mayor again. Because that's what it was all about. And at that point, Penguin double crosses her, is about to kill her, and then Batman comes in, takes out the security guy, or girl, and knocks out Penguin, and then says like, all right, well, you're going in, Jill. And she's like, you're not a cop. And she's like, does that ever stop me before? And then we get one last epilogue page of Jill talking to Mr. Mosaic from like 3 issues ago, saying like, hey, I'm sorry for stealing your money, but you understand it's just business. Can you talk to my dad and get me a good lawyer? And he's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. We got the best lawyer the money could buy. And this guy walks in named George Weaver, but he's like, I'm actually not a lawyer. In fact, I'm Snakeskin, and I'm here to kill you. And that's where it leaves off. What? Like, Batman kept saying things in here of like, of course, it's so obvious. It had to be Jill, the long-lost sister, and of course it was for Mayor Haiti's campaign. Like, this is so obvious. Was it? Like, was it, though? I feel like you were playing it a totally different way, and then in this last issue, you're like, oh, but we swerved it, and it's fine to do a swerve. I'm okay with that. But the fact that you had Batman being like, of course, it's so obvious. No. What? Also, we finally got payoff on the, like, security guard woman from 2 issues ago that, like, the issue ended on as if it was a cliffhanger. And all she does is just come up and say, hey, Penguin, there's been a bomb threat. And then, hey, Penguin, we see Jill down by the vaults. And then, hey, Penguin, I'm going to shoot Charlotte for you, or Jill for you. That's all she does. Like, she doesn't even, like, put up a fight. Batman comes in with a drop kick and just takes her out in one panel. I don't understand why that was such a thing. Regardless, I'm giving this issue a 6, and almost all of that relies on the fact that at least they managed to tie the issues together. Like, that first issue seems so completely unnecessary, but at least they brought it in of just like, no, actually it was part of the plan in order to get the criminals to put their money in with Penguin. Like, okay, fine, I guess. Ugh. So yeah, no, it's a 6, and I'm glad this arc is done, but I'm losing faith in Detective with every passing issue. Batwing number 7, written by Judd, Winick, art by Dustin, Nguyen. We left off last issue with Massacre coming to America to kill the last 2 members of the Kingdom, and this issue picks up with Batwing, Batman, and the man who was formerly Steelback going to stop him and get to the last 2 members. So this issue is basically just the backstory of the Kingdom and why they disbanded. So apparently there was a war going on just before the nation became the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the Kingdom was fighting on the side of the People's Army, which was just a revolutionary group of normal civilians. There was Staff, Earthstrike, Razorwire, Steelback, Deity, Thunderfall, and Dawnfire, as well as Josiah Cone being the science man in the chair. So the other 2 sides, because this was a 3-way war, was Masika Okura, a dictator who was known for just horrible things, just like genocide, and he ruled over the nation. And the third side was a half-dozen warlords who were abducting children from villages in the area to make their armies. And these 3 people were all vying for power, but the Kingdom sided on the side of the people, and as such, they prospered. They took out the other things, and they were going to make their last stand, the last battle against the dictator. But the Kingdom said, we couldn't be a part of that. We have to let the people be the ones that take out the dictator. It has to be their victory. So they were the ones who had to do it. And they did. They succeeded. They took the country, and it was all on them. But something happened that was an atrocity in the eyes of the Kingdom. And we see Batman has the entire Bat family investigating for Staff and Razorwire, the 2 people who are in Gotham. Their names are Moses Gawan and Kofi Iranzi, which is very fitting names for their respective names. So they're completely off the grid. There's been no activity, like no phone stuff. They aren't in their homes. They don't know where they are. But anyway, Batwing has Steelback continuing the story. And apparently, as the final battle was coming up, they got a call from the dictator who said, at first they thought, oh, you're surrendering, you're going to be giving up. But it turns out he's not surrendering. He's actually going to be teaming up with the warlords against the People's Army. They're both going to share power so that they don't lose it. He's willing to consolidate power if it means he's not outed completely. And all of the Kingdom realizes that the 2 armies of the warlords and the dictator combined would be enough to completely crush the People's Army. They wouldn't stand a chance. So they're trying to figure out, like, okay, well, we have to go warn them, but none of them have the ability to go get there right now, because as much as they are saying that them staying out of this final battle is for the people's sake, in actuality, they are exhausted and they are weak. So they realize that there's no way they're going to be able to reach the People's Army in time. However, there is a chance. There is something they can do because the dictator is offering them a deal. He will not side with the warlords and stand down his army on the condition that the Kingdom get him out of Africa and he can live out the rest of his days in peace. He gets away with all of his genocidal crimes, but the people will stand victorious. And in the end, they ended up doing the deal. They ended up allowing the warlord to escape. Allowing the dictator to escape. The warlords were left on their own, and they were completely crushed by the army of the people. But their army, the warlords' army, were made up of nothing but kidnapped children. So that was 50,000 kidnapped children dead. So obviously this splintered the group of people who thought that they should have still gone after the dictator. There could have been another way to handle this. Basically, everyone was just completely split on how to handle it. And some mild fighting broke out. Josiah Cone, the man in the chair, ended up getting a punch to the face. And in the end, the Kingdom was no longer a thing. And nor did they deserve to be in the eyes of Steelback. So Batwing's talking to Batman, and he realizes, I don't think I could have made the same decision in their place. I don't know what I would have done. But at least we have the backstory now, and we know why Massacre is going after them, because he was left standing as a warlord against this army when the dictator made him a promise. And at that moment, Batgirl gets to them, and apparently she's managed to track down that Staff and Razorwire own some warehouses in Gotham. So Robin and Nightwing go and investigate. When they get there, they feel that it's a safe house, that it has reinforced walls, but they smell something like burnt flesh, to which Batman tells them to blow the door open. But before they even get the chance, they are attacked by a whole bunch of lasers, which is apparently how staff works. And Nightwing quickly comes to the conclusion that, wait a minute, hold on, they're not attacking us. They have their own fight going on in the other side of the warehouse. Like, we're not even a part of it. And as they move in closer, they see Razorwire has been killed, and Staff is very soon close behind him. They don't outright say he's been killed, but it's pretty easy to assume that. And Robin makes the point of, like, didn't you say that Massacre works with, like, knives and machetes? Why is he using laser beams and explosions now? And Massacre, he walks out of the dust and he says, no, I'm not using those. I just brought a friend. And we see that behind him is the Steelback armor, which Steelback himself sees. And he's like, oh, dear God, tell your men to get out of there now. So, yeah, that's where we leave off with that. The start of the new arc of, I mean, it's still the continuing arc of the Massacre thing, but it's a new part of him being in Gotham. So, very interesting. I like it a lot. I really like the choice that the Kingdom had to make there, because it's not one that has an easy answer. It's not one that's a super apparent of, like, this is the right thing to do. Sometimes in comics they have a schism in the group, but, like, the answer's pretty obvious as to what it should be. This one is genuinely a hard choice, and I like how they set that up. Art-wise, Dustin Nguyen does a very good job, but it doesn't quite stand up to, I think it was Ben Oliver last arc. I really, really enjoyed that art style, and this is just a step down from that, but it's still very good. It's still a very good art style. So overall, I'd say I have to give this one a 7. Again, I think it's greatly well done. It sets up a great place for them to move forward in terms of why Massacre's doing what he's doing, but it does feel like we're kind of killing off the entirety of the Kingdom. Mark my words, though, Josiah Cone, definitely evil. There's no way he got punched in the face by a member of his own team and didn't turn evil. The fact they showed that specifically, I'm counting on that. So yeah, 7 for this. Definitely looking forward to the next issue. Action Comics number 7, written by Grant Morrison, art by Rags Morales. We left off 3 issues ago with the last part of the story of Metropolis disappearing via the Collector of Worlds. Superman realizes he can still save them, and he has an idea. This issue picks up, Superman's explaining, okay, so I'm just going to go and run really fast and then jump onto the spaceship as it's leaving the atmosphere. And the general lane there is like, I'm sorry, you're going to run real fast? You would need escape velocity, which apparently the math says is 25,000 miles an hour. You've never gone faster than 600. How do you expect to do that? And Superman's like, I'm just gonna, bye. And so he runs off, and we get this cool sequence of him running up a ramp, and his shoes are literally falling apart. He makes it up into space, and he piggybacks off of a satellite to land on the alien ship. But as he does so, before he can get in, he's wrapped up by tendrils, and they all start electrocuting him. So they bring him inside the ship, and the ship is just geeking out, or the Collector is saying, like, oh my god, I gotta live in Kryptonian, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But, you know, it's Superman, so he's able to withstand all the firepower that they're throwing at him to try to keep him down. So as he's throwing more and more robots at him, Superman's just trying to keep his ears open and hear people in Metropolis, and he's listening specifically to this radio station called Big Talk Radio. And as he makes his way through the ship, he comes across this room full of these big glass cylinders of different shrunken cities and outfits that go with each place. And he's like, wait a minute, hold on, that one's the place I've seen in my dreams. And we get a quick flashback to Krypton and his father talking to him. And he's like, in this outfit, this is the outfit of my people. So then we cut into Metropolis real quick, and just to keep things simple, Lois, Jimmy, and Lex are all there. And Lois is accusing Lex of having some part of it. Lex, of course, denies it. And he wants to try to keep the rocket safe, so there are some soldiers still standing around it. But soon enough, some robot nanite spiders come in, and they start attacking everybody around. And Lex is like, you guys stay with the ship. And Lois is like, fend for yourselves. Ignore what Lex Luthor says. Who cares? And they make their way down an alley into Glenn Morgan's hotel, where he's just sitting at the bar having a drink, surrounded by some police and some security. And Lex fetches himself a drink real quick, and he's like, all right, I guess maybe I can do something. Let me try calling the alien back. And Lois is like, I knew you were a part of this. Meanwhile, there's a little side thing here of Glenn Morgan talking to the dude behind the bar, who was the same dude back from issue 1, the little, like, short guy. And he's like, oh, I've been here for 8 years now. We're practically old friends, Mr. Glenn Morgan. Here, I even have your tie. I don't know where this is going to go, but it's going to go somewhere. And as they're talking, some of the nanites are starting to appear outside the hotel windows. The police in there fire at it and start taking it down. But as they look out, they realize, okay, yeah, we've been miniaturized because there is a giant T-shirted Superman standing at the horizon. So, yeah, there's that. Anyway, so then Superman just starts calling out to the Collector, and he's like, who are you? Talk to me. And he starts getting batted around by another one of the robots. As the Collector explains, like, well, I'm known by many different names. On Earth, I was known as the Internet. On Yod Kolu, I was known as Computo. On Krypton, I was known as Brainiac. So yeah, this is obviously Brainiac. And he basically, Superman just asks, like, what do you want from me? Send these people home. And he's like, no. See, here's the thing. I want a complete collection. And you, a living, breathing Kryptonian, that would definitely complete the collection. So yeah, you're going to have to stay here. Also, I need your rocket cradle, which is inside the Bottle City as well. And then, basically, for no reason, Brainiac's just like, I wonder, if I were to kill off the life support for the Krypton city of Kandor and the Earth city of Metropolis, which one would you choose to save? You can only save one. And Superman's like, what? I'm not going to say... Every living being is under my protection. You hear that? And he's like, yeah, okay, well, here's the deal. Pick one and save it. Would you reign as a king in your indestructible armor on Krypton? Or would you go back to the Earth who shunned you and hated you and made a weapon that could try to kill you? And as he's saying all this, Superman looks down at the city of Metropolis, and they're all chanting for Superman with lighters and lit up cell phones. And Superman's like, oh, these human beings, you're never going to be able to keep them in a bottle. And Superman uses his vision to see the rocket cradle is actually inside the bottle ship, and it's calling out for him. He's like, all right, I've made my choice. And Superman turns away from the Earth City, and everyone's like, oh my God, Superman's leaving us. Oh, we're all going to die. But then it turns out Superman's actually just going to the armor casing for the Krypton outfit. And he's like, you said this thing was indestructible, right? So I'm just going to put it on and prove my point. Because here's what's going to happen. I'm going to kick the ever-loving crap out of you. And then you're going to set both these cities free. And there's a little bit in here about Lex on the phone realizing, like, he made a deal to survive. And Brainiac's like, yeah, you are going to survive in the bottle. Ha ha. Lawyered you. And basically, it all ends with a splash page of Superman. He dons the outfit. It just magically transforms into his red and blue with his crest. And we see the Collector of Worlds, the giant centipede-looking monster, and Corbin, it's Metallo. It's straight up just Metallo. They are here, and they say, oh, you will join the collection or die. Also, there was a reveal somewhere in there that Earth is going to die soon. You know, little things like that. Here's the thing. I like this issue on its own. It's a fine enough issue, but it does severely hurt the fact that we just had to take 2 issues doing a weird time travel story instead of just picking up and doing this. I understand that's probably for like artist purposes of like letting Rags Morales get ahead and allowing him to do that, but it really takes me out of it, the fact I had to wait 3 months for this story to continue, and then it's just continuing on like nothing ever happened. Just, yeah, you know, he jumps into space. Especially when it's supposed to be so quickly happening afterwards. So yeah, just a couple issues with that. Overall, though, it's still a good read. I would say I give it a 6.5. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that it's mostly just Brainiac being like, let's set up the fight for the next issue. Because really, there shouldn't be a fight. Like, Brainiac should have no reason to fight at all. But now, for some reason, we've architected a fight to happen. So, yeah. it's got its flaws, but it's still a good issue overall. And I think there's only one more issue left in the arc, so we'll see how that wraps up next time. Red Lanterns number 7, written by Pugh Milligan, art by Ed Benes and Diego Bernard. We left off last issue with Jack becoming a Red Lantern and going around trying to kill the people who wronged him in life, and then being stopped by Guy Gardner because clearly Green Lanterns had a crossover at some point. And additionally, the actual Red Lantern Corps stuff wrapped up with Atrocitus beating the ever-loving crap out of Bleeze, and then the other Red Lanterns coming up and trying to defend her, so somewhat of defecting. This issue picks up and just assumes that the other Red Lanterns have fully defected. So we pick up with Sector 666, a bunch of Yellow Lanterns who also defected from their thing once Sinestro betrayed them because of the events of Green Lantern, the Corps book. So, yeah. And they're like, okay, so we cut off all of our fingers, all of our rings are off now. We can live free of Sinestro's reign, like here in Sector 666, because even Sinestro fears the Red Lanterns. And then, of course, the Red Lantern Corps all show up on their ship and break in. It's just like, hey, everybody, we're here to torture and kill you because it is I, Bleeze, leader of the Red Lanterns. So then we cut back to Earth, and it's basically just an extended fight scene between Jack and Guy Gardner, Guy is showing ridiculous restraint, and he's like, hey, buddy, here's the thing. I know that being a Red Lantern turns you into some sort of a monster. I know you're not really in control of yourself right now, which is why I'm not taking it personally that you're trying to kill me. And this entire time, Jack is like trying to fight back against it, but every time he does so, he loses his rage energy and therefore like falls out of the sky a little bit. So he has to keep on staying enraged to keep on staying in the fight. So as Guy is continuing on the fight, he's like, dude, starting to piss me off. I got my own anger issues, but here's the thing. I know that you're not a monster. You can be cured. There's a thing called Blue Lanterns, and they can remove your ring. And finally, Jack manages to fight it enough that he actually manages to spit out some words. He says, please help me. And Guy's like, hold up. Did a Red Lantern just talk to me? Because that, like, doesn't happen, ever. And Jack, like, throws Guy up into the air. And it's shown that he actually moved him out of the way of like a car wreck that was happening around them. And Guy's like, you are the weirdest Red Lantern I've ever seen. But he realizes that the car wreck, there are people who are hurt in there. So he goes down to help out the civilians. And he calls up to Jack saying like, hey, if you're, actually trying to help, come down here and help me. But Jack gets this feeling, this urge, this pull through his ring to fly off into space. And so he does. He just goes off. And Guy's like, all right. Bye. And we see Jack go through space, and he's thinking like, humans can't really survive in space, which means whatever I am right now, I'm not human. So we cut back to Bleeze, who's on a asteroid torturing the previous Yellow Lanterns, and basically just asking like, so why aren't you part of the Yellow Lantern Corps anymore? And they're like, I told you, Sinestro betrayed us in the book Green Lantern, just read that. And Bleeze is like, nah, that sounds stupid. So he keeps torturing them. One of them finally speaks up and says, like, hey, what did we ever do to you? Like, why do we deserve this? Nothing could be this worthwhile. And she's like, oh, what did you do to me? What did the Yellow Lanterns do to me? Did you forget my whole backstory of you, like, torturing me and cutting off my wing? Did you maybe just forget all of that? So as she's saying, like, oh, but this is Blease's Red Lanterns. This is mine, and I will lead them into a new age where we will serve the Great Rage and rescue those who have been oppressed, and blah, blah, blah. And the guy just starts laughing because he's like, please, they are not your Red Lanterns. They are Atrocitus's Red Lanterns. There is no way in hell you're ever going to be able to beat Atrocitus. And she's like, shut up. And she hits him with the napalm blood. And, of course, he just disintegrates into a skeleton. And Bleeze is like, yeah, well, Atrocitus is now just a bumbling old man who's just looking for his lost Krona. So, Blease's Red Lanterns for life, yo. And then we cut over to Atrocitus, who's still on Yzmal. He's wandering through a jungle on his planet, which, according to him, when he first made the Red Lantern Corps, he had a couple of trial runs. Didn't really work out, and the things that came out were pretty much abominations of life. So he killed them all and buried them here at the Abominable Zone. And all of their corpses basically turn this place into a garden just by fertilizing it. So as he's making his way through looking for Corona, trying to track that, one of the abominations comes out, and its name is Abysmus, and he's like shocked to see Abysmus. He's like, I buried you centuries ago. What's up, man? And Abysmus is like, turns out some of your blood magic allowed me to come back to life, and I've been using all the rest over blood magic to bring to life all the other people you buried here. So meet the Abysmorphs. We're here to kill you. And then Atrocitus just looks at him for a minute and is just like, wait a minute. That thing you're wearing, is that Crona's skin? And Abysmus is like, yeah, I flayed him. His power is now mine. And Atrocitus is like, you're wearing his skin. You smell like him. This is the closest I'm ever going to get to killing Crona. Thank you so much for this. And he walks up and just starts tearing through all the Abysmorphs. And he gets to Abysmus and he's like, wait, hold up. We heard that you were washed up. You're not supposed to be able to fight back against us. And he's immediately about to tear Abysmus apart when Jack comes hurtling out of the sky and lands on Yzmal, enough to distract Atrocitus. And he's like, dude, who are you? What are you doing on my planet? And Abysmus gets behind Atrocitus, picks up a spike, and throws it through Atrocitus' chest, saying like, haha, I am rejected no longer. Now, kill the other Red Lantern, my Abysmorphs. And Jack is like, oh boy, I'm a Red Lantern, I guess. And that means I'm one of these monsters. Okay, that's where it leaves off. It's good. It's a fine continuation. I feel that this is the last issue in this trade, so I have to assume the last for the arc, really. Or at least that's where they just chose to split it up. And it's good. It's fine. I feel like it's definitely gotten its footing more than it did in like the first couple issues. That was more of just like, all right, we're setting it up. We're telling you where it's going. We're doing this thing. But I also feel like it hasn't quite understood like where it's going in its entirety, because a lot of times it's bouncing between like, we're going to avenge the oppressed, but then it's, oh, we got to do Crona, and then it's the war within, and then it's like, these are all fine arcs on their own, but we keep switching between them so often it doesn't feel like it really knows what it wants to do yet. But this issue I did think was fine. It sets up Jack as an interesting character because he's able to fight against the Red Lanterns. And the Bleeze thing just kind of came out of nowhere, especially because last arc it was just a couple people stood up for Bleeze, and somehow that translates to the entire Corps is on her side. It seems a bit too much, but I'm going to give this one a 6.5. And I am looking forward to seeing how the next trade, if not the next arc, ends up starting. Green Arrow number 7, written by Nocenti, art by Harvey, Tolibao. I hate this issue. That's unfair. Let me get into it. So this is the start of a new run by Nocenti, and I'm just going to get out of the way. I don't like the art style. The whole thing, it has very fine pencil work done. I can see a lot of skill and craft went into it, but it's just not a style that I like in comic books, and it's just a little bit too overly detailed for my personal taste. Maybe you like it. I don't suggest you read it to find out, but regardless, I'm just getting through that, so just remember that attributes to my anger towards this. So this issue opens up with Oliver Queen just reading some memos from Q Corp, I guess, and they're all boring him. He just says how boring it is being Oliver Queen and how he should just be Green Arrow all the time. When all of a sudden he's attacked by like a whole bunch of tiny miniature swarming arrows, which he throws up an umbrella arrow to stop. And he looks out at, he still gets hit by a couple of them, but he looks out at the roof's skyline and he sees 3 ninjas coming towards him. So he's about to shoot them with like an electrified net arrow. And then a hummingbird shows up and starts pecking at Green Arrow. And it throws off his aim enough that it only catches 2 of the 3 ninjas. So they get electrified and wrapped up. But then the third one shows up. And Green Arrow just spends a full page and a half saying, "You fight like a girl." Yeah. And then finally the ninja stops and is like, okay, we give up. We adore you, Green Arrow. We're your biggest fans. And they all unmask, and of course they're very luscious, bodacious blondes. And Green Arrow's like, well, what can I do for you, ladies? And they're like, oh, we have the biggest crush on you, and we invent things, and we just wanted to show you them because you've been ignoring our fan mail. And they're all named Skylark, like all three of them. And apparently when they were in the womb, their dad ran some weird like tests and like tinkered on them a bit. So now they like maybe share a hive mind. It's hard to say. But regardless, they just want to show off their cool new little weapons that Green Arrow can use. And they show off like the mini swarming arrows and some tiny smoke bomb arrows that you can hide because you're always ending up in close combat anyway, so you could use some like smaller arrows, I guess. And basically they're like, we have a whole bunch more at our lab. And he's like, cool, let's go there. And they're like, oh, it's in Canada. And he's like, cool, let's take the jet. So we go back to Queen Industries, Q Corp, whatever the fuck it's called now. And Green Arrow Oliver Queen is just listening to all of his like assistants and employees talk to him, and he's like, okay, here's the deal. If you have any questions, go talk to somebody else. I am literally done with it. Goodbye. And he goes and talks to his one assistant, Naomi, and basically says, like, here's the deal. I'm going to go off the grid. I am just, maybe I'll just say that I'm working from home. Like, I don't, what's the point of having like an office if we can just get all the work done from home? Say it's something about the energy or the environment. Yeah, just make it sound good. And don't tell Emerson. But of course, Emerson's on the phone. And he's like, hey, Emerson, so here's the deal. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. I am still on the board, but like I'm not going to be working in this building. By the way, taking the jet, bye. And so he just goes. Anyway, he's in the jet, this goddamn sequence. So he's just like flirting and talking to these three girls, and they're all just explaining a bit more about themselves. And then at some point, they make their way into the bedroom, and yeah, they call it a menage a quatre. Sure. One little art question here is that as they are undressing, 3 different pairs of Green Arrow's goggles come off. I don't know how that works at all, but regardless, it did. So they land the jet inside of their private hangar, and as they're going inside to look at the lab, the triplets reveal that they have hacked into the jet and they're having it take off without him, and it will crash over top the Pacific Ocean, and everyone will think everyone will think Green Arrow is dead. So there's that. And they hold him at gunpoint or whatever, but, they all start fighting. Green Arrow manages to get the upper hand for most of it, but in the end, they get some quick shots in and take him out by being drugged, I think. So they're holding him down, and it's revealed that all the stuff that happened with the hummingbirds and everything else like that was all part of their thing, and it had something to do with like pheromones and some tranquilizers or whatever to make them hurt their bidding. And Green Arrow was literally like, you guys understand that you are gorgeous blondes and I'm kind of a pig, so I would literally have done that without the pheromones, right? And they're like, well, shut up. And one of them just storms off, like, angrily, because I guess she's a rebellious one, despite the fact that they all are exactly the same. Fine, whatever. And one of them reveals that the entire thing is all part of their daddy's game of, quote, whichever one of them loves him the best inherits his kingdom. So yeah, there's that. So then we get to the plane crashing in the Pacific, and the people who know that Oliver's Green Arrow are like, well, okay, let's just like put out a fake memo that he's like going to be working from a place, and we can play off that he's not actually dead and blah, blah, blah. But then we see that before they have any chance to do this, somebody has investigated the plane crash, has leaked it to the press have printed the paper, and Emerson's already seen Oliver Queen dead, ? And that's where we leave off. Oh, God, here's the thing. I'm not telling you all of the stupid little quippy one-liners that are being thrown out constantly. Like, he never shuts up for even a second. And that goes for all 3 of the triplets as well. And they all finish each other's sentences as well, which is just super cute. I hate this already. Like, the last 6 issues on it were so draining. And we just get even further down the ladder. I'm so sick of it. I'm sick of this Green Arrow crap. I'm giving this a 1.5. Maybe the art could work better for you. That's the only thing that I think could be redeeming. But everything else in here so far, the only reason it's getting as high as a 1.5 is because it's the beginning of the arc, and I want to cut it at least a little bit of slack that could maybe turn it around. But I hold absolutely no hope for that. So, good Lord, give me strength for the rest of this. Justice League International number 7, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Aaron Lopresti. Last issue, the team was being introduced to the public, and then a bomb went off, and nobody was prepared, and they all seemingly died. But obviously that didn't happen, but there was something that happened. So here's the deal. This issue doesn't tell so much of a forward story. There is a little bit of plot there, but it's more so of the status quo change, of how we're mixing things up. So I'll give you the bare bones of the story here. The explosion went off. Booster and Guy Gardner were pretty much immediately protected because of their construct/force field abilities. So they go around and they are just immediately trying to save whoever they can. They see in the smoke there are some sort of energy beings that are attacking still, like still causing chaos. And so Batman swoops in and he is like, hey, all right, me and Booster, we're going to deal with the survivors. We're going to rescue whoever we can. Guy, you take out the energy beings. And Guy just immediately goes up and does that. And we see someone on the rooftop behind is named Lightweaver. And he's like, hey, the lantern destroyed my energy constructs. You want me to attack now? And a voice over his phone or whatever is saying, no, let them stew on this tragedy for a while. And once Guy takes him out, he helps out with the rescue op as well. And just to give you just the overview, they find these people over the course of whatever. They open up with Booster has fire. She is knocked out. She is in a coma, and she's not doing so hot. Then we go to, I think it's Vixen, who her back is messed up. Like, she has a spine injury, and she, as it's revealed later, wants to get her to the hospital. She might never walk again. Ice is the next one found. Booster goes into the fire and sees just an ice like cocoon in there, and when he breaks it open, Ice is in there. She's more or less fine, but both of her legs are broken and she has some serious internal injuries. Batman, he actually swooped in once the explosion happened because he was just watching from afar. He saved Godiva. Godiva's fine, just a little bit roughed up from it. And so that leaves the only two heroes left that they need to find is August General and Rocket Red. And as they're saying, like, all right, we got to get back in there and find them, August General comes out of the fire holding Rocket Red's body, and he is just dead. He's gone. So Godiva kind of freaks out about this and just like, we're supposed to be superheroes, and we were taken out by a simple bomb? Are you kidding me? And Booster's like, I know, this is totally screwed up. And Batman's like, okay, hey, crisis time. Get over yourselves. Deal with the problem. You guys deal with the survivors. Find whoever you can. Meanwhile, I'm going to find who's behind this and make sure it doesn't happen again. So then we see Guy Gardner is in the hospital, and as Ice is being carted in, and of course he's got a thing for her, and he tells the doctors, like, hey, you take good care of her, she's a special lady. And then someone in the waiting room is like, hey, all of our family, all the people at the UN thing are special. Like, your person's no special than any of ours, so, wait in line, bud. Booster comes across the, like, mounted gauntlet thing that Rocket Red had, so he has it scanned to see if he can get any info off of it. He calls Skeets up to do so, and as they're going through and trying to find more people, they eventually come across Andre Briggs and Emerson Esposito, aka the two UN liaisons who are in charge of the team, and both of them are dead. So Booster heads to the hospital along with Godiva and August General, asks Guy how things are going. He just recounts exactly what I told you about Vixen, Fire and Ice, and he asks, hey, did Briggs ever turn up? And he says Briggs and Esposito are dead. And then it turns out that the guy who was chastising Guy earlier was actually the father of Esposito. And he's like, did you say Esposito's dead? That's my daughter. And Booster just goes, I'm so sorry, but yes. And then immediately he unloads on Booster, just like, this is all your fault. You guys just attract danger. You are literally the worst. And of course, on cue, the chairwoman that greenlit the JLI last issue, walks in and it basically says like, all right, well, you guys immediately blew it. This team is null and void as of now, and if you guys ever choose to work as a team in the future, I will sue the ever-loving crap out of you. And Booster keeps trying to interrupt, but he keeps getting shut down until finally he just storms out angrily. And we see Lightweaver is given the green light to finally put the final nail in the coffin. So Booster goes up on the roof. He gets angry about how this team was supposed to be something, but now it's all turned into death and tragedy. And then he's attacked by Lightweaver, who made a giant samurai light construct. And Booster's like, wait a minute, I recognize this construct. You were the guy who was attacking us. And he's like, damn right, name's Lightweaver. And he's like, cool, you've given me all the permission I need to cut loose on you. And he fires off an energy blast, which does nothing. And Lightweaver's like, are you kidding me? Is that really the best you got? Dude, I'm going to mop the floor with you. And he does proceed to do so. And as he's going in for like the final kill shot, Booster looks up and sees the shadow of a bat above him. And he's like, Batman? But it turns out, no, it's not Batman. It's Batwing, who's here from his own series. Read that series, I guess. So, yeah. I like this issue. I think it's very well done because, like I think I said at the end of last issue, that explosion just came out of nowhere. And this does feel like, okay, you were given zero prep time and then there's just a tragedy. How do you react to that? And this feels realistic, where people are just freaking out. They're just like, okay, we got to do this. And then they see their teammates completely bloodied and like possibly really, really hurt, if not dead. Like, yeah, it did a good job of setting that all up. And I really like how they executed that. My only complaint here is Lightweaver as a villain. Just, I don't know. I would rather they would have went with someone that seemed a little bit more threatening, even if it was someone new. Like Lightweaver's dressed in all colorful clothes and he makes these colorful constructs. It just seems a little bit silly for something so serious as a bombing of a UN team. But regardless, it's interesting at the very least. So I am looking forward to seeing how this goes forward and whether or not these team members are going to get better or they're going to be replaced. So yeah, Justice League International is at least shaking things up in the new arc. Men of War issue 7, written by James Robinson, art by Phil Winslade. This is completely unconnected to all the previous Men of War stuff. That story is over, and this is just a completely different thing to round out this single issue, honestly, because this even wraps itself up. So, meet George Saint, SAS, which I believe is British Special Air Service or something. The story opens up with them in, I believe, Iran or Iraq or some Middle Eastern country, and he's talking to his teammate, and teammate's like, hey, we're going home. We're going to be doing security at the Olympics this year. Isn't that cool? And they're like, yeah. Just, I don't know. I feel kind of bad leaving when there's so much work to still be done. And we see them on a cliff top with their other teammates, but just a whole bunch of slaughtered insurgents around them, of the Taliban specifically. And then we get a breakdown of who George Saint is from perspective of the other guy who he was talking to, who I don't think ever gets a name. I think it might be Freddie. Yeah, Freddie. So George Saint was a captain, and he's been like everywhere around the world. He's done a huge amount of missions, even solo ones, but he's always been very hush-hush about what he did. He would just give a location, and that's it. Like he'd say, okay, yeah, I did Iran, or I did Libya or whatever, and that's it. That's all you would get out of him. He's very quiet like that. But finally a day comes where his entire troop is packing up to all go home, and it turns out that he's actually staying. He's got 3 more weeks because he wants to be able to wrap something up, and he tells his teammate, like, all right, yep, I'll see ya, or, maybe I won't, because as the teammate laments, there's one thing that he knew George had to stay behind for, and that's the leopard. And then we get a backstory here of they went around and their entire job was killing Taliban higher-ups, just dismantling the organization as a whole and making it so it would crack under the infrastructure. And they did a really good job of it, but as it turns out, there was one guy named the Leopard who was just beyond reach. They were unable to get to him, and he was a very, very, very bad dude. So George goes in solo into this giant red field of poppies where he knows the leopard is, I guess. And he comes across all of his men and just one by one with nothing but a knife just starts hitman style assassinating them, quick slash across the throat. And he makes his way through. And as he kills the last guy, Leopard is standing behind him with a gun pointed at him. And he's like, all right, well, how'd you find me? And he's like, I'm good. How'd you find me? He's like, I also am good. Also, you killed all of my men. And they start having a little conversation about how educated the Leopard actually is. He's not just a mindless brute. But the Leopard makes conversation about the poppy field that they're standing in. And apparently, I guess in Britain they have Remembrance Day, which involves them wearing a poppy for the fallen soldiers or whatever. And he's like, so why do you set fire to my poppy fields? And he's like, well, you're using them to make heroin, so kind of a big difference. And Leopard's like, all right, well, do you think your men will mourn you when you're dead? And he's like, oh, I'm not going to die. And he immediately lunges at Leopard, gets a slash off on his leg. Leopard fires, misses. George puts his knife into Leopard's arm. Leopard picks him up by his throat. George kicks him in the nuts. And then Leopard drops him and pulls the knife out. He lunges after George. George dodges the knife, knocks it out of his hands. But then Leopard just starts strangling George. And as he's doing so, he's like, you really thought you could kill me? Just one man? I've done so much more than that. And George manages to spit out, like, I already killed you. He's like, what was that? He's like, that first slash, it got your femoral artery. And he looks down and he realizes, Wile E. Coyote style, he's lost too much blood. And he just passes out on top of George. So George gets up and the narration picks up. But George sets fire to the field of poppies, like he said he was going to. And the narration tells us how George came back into the barracks just a few days later. He didn't say where he went, what he did, but his voice was a little bit hoarse. So maybe he caught a cold on the trip. Bop, 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 bop. So, yeah, it's fine. For a one-shot story, it's fine on its own of just, okay, here's George Saint, and here's a cool thing he did. I don't feel like we really got that much of who is George Saint. He's just a silent badass. And that's fine for these stories. I'm not complaining that that's all we get, but it definitely feels like the character lived and died for this comic. We weren't setting up for, maybe we'll see George Saint in something else. It's like, no, we knew he was a one-shot, and this is all that you're ever going to get. So we're good. It did feel kind of like a backup in that way, and that makes sense. The artist, at least, I'm not sure if James Robinson, but Phil Winslade did a lot of the backups for this comic before this, so that kind of makes sense in that regard. I did like it. I'm not saying that it's bad. The art style was very good. It had this painterly style to it. The red poppy field definitely stands out. It makes it very visually interesting the whole way through. But yeah, no, it's writing-wise, it knew it was self-contained. It didn't try to do anything too big. It was just, here's a guy on a mission, and he does it. The end. Okay, that's all you need. It's not amazing. It's not blowing my hair back, but it's also not bad in any way. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 6. It's good. It's a fine issue, but again, it just exists on its own. It's not meant to be anything bigger than what it is. So I can't really grade it for anything bigger than what it is. So yeah, 6 for this. And there's only one issue left, which I believe will also be a standalone. So we'll see how Men of War ends then. Stormwatch number 7, written by Paul Jenkins, art by Ignacio Calero. We are starting a new arc after the events of the last one. And this issue opens up with 2 people in hazmat suits in Chernobyl, Ukraine. And they're walking around and they are getting some readings on a Geiger counter. It's going crazy. And then all of a sudden, one of their bodies has a huge electrified portal thing inside of it. And it kills the other one. And that's our opener. So then we go up to Stormwatch HQ, and Jack Hawksmoor is trying to tell a joke to Martian Manhunter, and doesn't go over that well because he doesn't understand humor. Meanwhile, Martian Manhunter is trying to teach Jenny Quantum how to do 8th-dimensional quantum math or something, and she's not quite getting it. Engineer walks by and she immediately breaks her concentration to ask for a puppy because that's just the thing she wants, I guess. And then Engineer walks into a room where Midnighter and Apollo are keeping watch over the globe, and nothing's really happening. Apparently, they set fire to the Himalayas in order to kill something that was there. I think that was the monster horn thing from last arc. And then Apollo was like, hey, Engineer, you seem kind of down in the dumps. Is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, I mean, Harry, the guy who betrayed us, was kind of my boyfriend, so, taking it a bit harder than most. But I'm glad to have you guys around. Thank you for keeping watch. Anyway, I'm going to go down and talk to Charlie, which is apparently the fun little name they gave the Demonite AI that's running the ship. So we get Midnighter and Apollo talking for a while, and then they pick up these scanners of what's going on in Ukraine. And so they get a portal door made, and Apollo heads down to take care of whatever the issue is. And it's causing some interference between communications, but basically as soon as he gets down there, he's like, this is nothing I can't handle, though the energy does feel a little bit weird. And then a giant light that looks exactly like the other one opens up next to him and starts spewing out these strange tentacle whip-like protrusions or something. So that starts going off. And the alarm starts blaring back at Stormwatch HQ, and everyone rushes into the room. And Midnighter tells them exactly, like, hey, we sent down Apollo, something happened. And Engineer's like, you did what? I am the leader. I told you to run this by me. And he's like, yeah, sorry, we're still learning the whole team thing. What do you want to do? And immediately Engineer's like, all right, we're going to make a door. Jack's going to go through. He's going to talk to the city of Ukraine, or city of Pripyat. And meanwhile, we'll see what we can do about Apollo. So then we cut back to Apollo, and he is not doing hot. He is being, tied up and drained of his energy. These beasts are coming in and doing crazy things. And as Martian Manhunter is seeing this, he says how they're back. And Engineer's like, who's back? Tell me what's going on. And Manhunter just immediately brushes her off and is like, Jenny, hey, you know those equations we're going over? Do you think you got it? And she's basically like, well, I mean, probably, yeah, I think I got it. And so he's like, cool, all right, we got to head down. And Engineer's like, no one's going down there until I know what's going on. She's like, Manhunter just jumps in like, if you trust me, if you understand that this is a crisis, and you trust me, let me do this, and I promise I'll explain on the way back. There's no time. So she opens up a door. Jenny, Q, and Manhunter go down. And basically just tells them how, keep them in some sort of weird in-between states of quantum fluctuation or whatever, and Jenny uses her abilities to do so while Manhunter runs in, grabs Apollo, and starts running her way out. But as he's doing so, Jenny is really, struggling to keep these things contained, and he tells her to try to contain just one of them and bring it through the door with them. And she does so, and it brings through, and a giant lightning storm happens. And as it comes through, Manhunter tells him, Engineer, you got to tell the ship to make this crazy quantum thing. And Engineer's like, ship, if you understood any of that, do it. And it does, and it contains the thing that is attacking for now. Then we cut over to Jack, who's walking through, I don't know, a building of cities, as weird as that sounds, all of them personified. And we have Pripyat, where Chernobyl took place, in a hospital bed, seemingly with cancer, as is fitting, and it has two caretakers, which are Hiroshima and Nagasaki, for what should be obvious reasons. And basically, they're like, yeah, he's not doing hot. He's really on his last legs here, and we're doing everything we can. But Jack comes up and basically asks, hey, do you know what's going on? Is there anything that you know? And he doesn't, but he does scream out how they're monsters and we're invisible to them. I lit a candle for them by mistake. So Jack's like, all right, that'll be fine. And Pripyat asks, hey, Jack, you're the god of cities. Am I going to get better? And he's like, yeah, you're going to get better. And Pripyat's like, soon? And he's like, no, not soon. And he walks out. So at that point, Apollo's coming to, and they're asking Midnighter and him, okay, do you know what happened? And he's like, no, we just reacted. We didn't see them actually show up. And as they're doing this, the strand that they had built the strand that they had captured and built that thing around is starting to break free and start breaking out. And Jenny tries to use her powers to contain it, but it's just getting too strong. And as it lashes out, it attacks Apollo, and it seems to like disintegrate him. Like he's not there anymore. So an engineer goes up to Manhunter and is just like, hey, all right, no more games, tell me what it is. And apparently it's an ancient enemy that's known to the Martians as well as the Daemonites that exists in a parallel dimension that doesn't even know that this dimension like exists. Like it doesn't pay them any sort of mind. But when Chernobyl happened, apparently some rare things were made, and these people on this alternate plane, they actually have to mine for gravity. Like it's a commodity, and they came here because it was like a rare form of a graviton or something was made. So they are here to mine for our gravity and are messing up the universe because of it. So yeah, that's it. And then Jenny Q asked for a puppy. Hell of a big idea, mining for gravity. I'm give it to him on that. I'm liking it so far, but it seems it's striking me again as like the beginning of the first arc, where it's just throwing a whole bunch of big stuff that doesn't make any sense, and then we'll slowly get more understanding as we progress. Not a bad thing, but definitely something that hurts the individual issue. Like the arc will be great, but the individual issue is kind of hurt by it because you're just sitting there going, what? Huh? What? So yeah, overall, I'll give it a 6. And again, I like it. It's just the thing of it's hurt by they're just throwing out all this exposition now so they don't have to do it later. Or I guess all of the inciting incidents now so they don't have to really worry about doing the big bombastic thing later. So we'll see how it goes, but I am interested at the very least. O.M.A.C number 7, written by Dan DiDio and Keith Giffen, art by Keith Giffen. Last issue, Maxwell Lord swore vengeance on Brother Eye for being so douchey, and I'm just going to zoom through this issue because it genuinely does not matter in any way. So O.M.A.C is attacked by Superman. Turns out that Maxwell Lord is using his checkmate connections to get Superman in on this, and as O.M.A.C tries to fight, Superman basically punches him in the stomach and destroys like half his body. And as O.M.A.C super powers up and gets ready for more, Superman just heat visions him in the face, and Brother Eye's like, oh no, yeah, we're gonna lose this fight. Okay, teleporting you out now. And then Superman, after seeing O.M.A.C get away, is like, all right, let me talk to Maxwell Lord. I may not like working with the guy, but that monster must be stopped. And then the entire rest of this issue is just, who cares land? Like, who cares? None of this, like, this is not O.M.A.C's story. This is just other Jack Kirby stuff. So he wakes up in a zoo in Toledo, and Brother Eye's like, hey, it's going to take some time to fix O.M.A.C. Just stay as Kevin for now. Bye. And so Kevin goes and he gets something out of the vending machine, and he's greeted by, I think, a bear that can talk. And it's named Reddy. And as Reddy screams, because they both scream at each other, a little diminutive walking tiger shows up. They're all bipedal, by the way. They all walk on 2 feet. And its name is Tuffy. And there's also a talking zebra and a talking warthog. And they're all like, oh my god, a human's here. And Kevin has the exact same reaction I had reading this of, talking animals. Sure, why not? And they got their whole other plot going on, where apparently this place has a warden named Warden Game, and he does experiments on the animals, and that makes it so that they can talk. And he took Tuffy's dad as a prisoner like a whole long time ago, and now Tuffy is finally about to make his move and go and rescue his dad. And Kevin's just kind of along for the ride. So they make their way over to a carousel, and he types in some commands that he saw the warden typing in, and he manages to get into the secret thing that was hidden underneath the carousel. And as he does so, a secret silent alarm goes off, and the warden's like, oh, well, we must have company. Let me prepare for my guests. And they make their way into what Tuffy calls it, the evil factory. And the warden's there, and everyone freaks out for a second except for Tuffy. And Tuffy's like, where's my dad? And the warden's like, he's right here. He's my greatest creation. And the dad comes out, and he's a giant white tiger that has been programmed to kill and attack, specifically with a command D. If you get it yet, you get it. So the father goes and attacks all of Tuffy's friends. Kevin realizes he's in trouble and asks Brother Eye to activate him, which he does without like any sort of anything. And Brother Eye tells him, like, hey, ignore the stupid animal fight going on over there. Go take care of the warden. He has some tech I might be interested in. And as he attacks the warden's like, wait a minute, you're O.M.A.C. My half-brother Mokari from Checkmate told me about you. By the way, there is no warden game. I'm actually, and he takes off his like hood, and it turns out he's a talking monkey named Simeon. Yep, so O.M.A.C. gives chase on Simeon. Meanwhile, Tuffy's dad is literally killing all of Tuffy's friends, and Tuffy's like, I have to make a choice here. And he breaks off a stalactite from the cave and shoves it into his father's skull. And the loud roars that came from it distract O.M.A.C. long enough that Simeon manages to get away. So Tuffy's crying over his dad, and then Brother Eye just tells him, like, wow, that's sad. Anyway, I took a look and there's no tech I want here, so please just burn this place to the ground. And O.M.A.C. does. And then he turns back into Kevin, and Kevin asks Tuffy, like, what are you going to do now, Tuffy? Tuffy's like, I will take up my place as Prince Tufton, and I will tell all my brothers and sisters about our father's fate. Goodbye. And Kevin's like, I mean, what's the worst that can really happen by letting a talking tiger out in the public? And Brother Eye's like, you're right. I'm sure nothing bad will ever happen. Ah ha 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 ha. Freeze frame, play the ending song to Full House. God, I dislike this issue so much because it has nothing to do with O.M.A.C. anymore. This is just the, hey, remember that Jack Kirby thing book? Like, that's literally all that we're doing now. Just a wink, wink, nudge, nudge of like, hey, by the way, Talking Animals goes into Kamandi, Last Boy on Earth. You know, the future story that Jack Kirby wrote, and we just love Jack Kirby so much here, and I get it. He's a good writer. He did some cool things, but you're not celebrating him by just going wink, wink, nudge, nudge, look at this. Tell a story, actually, for God's sakes. Either way, I'm giving this like a 3. It's just, why? Why did we do this? Did you have like a bigger plan for if you didn't have to get canceled? It's Dan DiDio writing this. He is quite literally the co-publisher. If he didn't want to cancel this book, he didn't have to. But he did, and he decided to just sidetrack his own story for a little bit here as we come up to the ending. There is one issue left here, and I am not looking forward to it. Hawk and Dove, number 7, written and art by Rob Liefeld, with additional art help from Marat Mychaels. Last issue was just kind of a one-and-done Batman crossover. I don't care about it that much. This issue picks up with Dove in her human form and, like, wearing the most skin-tight dress humanly possible. It's practically painted on. Just dancing in the middle of a club, surrounded by some guys, while Hawk is over by the side, just being like, how dare she be over there dancing with guys and letting out her emotions over her ex-boyfriend. And then some big meaty guy who's drunk comes up and hugs Dove from behind. Dawn, I guess I should call her. And as soon as this happens, Hank just gets up, lays out the dude over like 3 panels, despite him not doing like anything like at all. Like, by the time she says gross, he doesn't say another word. So yeah, anyway, Hank grabs Dawn and they run out of the nightclub, and they basically just 2 pages here of Hank being like, you can't get yourself so worked up over your ex and like bump and grind with every guy in there. And she's like, dude, what are you talking about? You're the one who just knocked out a guy. And he's like, somehow, I couldn't tell you how, they managed to make Hank sound sweet to Dawn, of him like caring about her. And she says, all right, I promise I'll be less, as far as I can tell, slutty, is what she's saying. But like, what? Anyway, they are immediately attacked. Hank gets a javelin through his shoulder, and then they transform into their avatars, and we see this guy named the Hunter who is hunting them. And this whole issue is basically just an extended fight scene where they keep on attacking Hunter and keep making so many fucking, like, one-liners about, like, you should know that you shouldn't wound what you can't kill. And, oh, well, will I be the hunted or the hunter? I'm sparing you, I'm telling you. So, anyway, the Hunter just basically attacks them. And at one point, he lops off one of Hawk's fingers. And he's like, haha, I now have the talon of an avatar. And then Dove jumps in, and he uses his whip to get some of her hairs and says, yes, and now I have the feathers of the other one. The talons of the hawk and the feathers of the dove. You both have been defeated. And so he's like maybe about to do something more, but then this woman comes in named Zyra, who is a servant of Horus and follower of the hawk, and she just like knocks him on the back of the head and he teleports out. And they're like, who the hell are you and why should we trust you? And they're like, look, I can explain everything. Come back to my safe house because you are in big trouble. And I genuinely am so confused as to the rest of this plot here. But anyway, apparently Zyra comes from some group of people that like worship the hawk as a deity, and there's other people who want to destroy him as a false god. And she can offer them safety and like keep them free from harm of whoever may come and try to kill them. But this guy managed to lop off fingers and hair, so he's obviously a threat. And Dove's like, all right, I guess we'll trust you, but if this is a trap, you're gonna get more than you bargained for. And then we cut to elsewhere, where the Hunter meets up with a guy named Dakan, who just seems like your general mysticism sort of guy. And he delivers the talon and the feathers, aka the finger and the hair. And Dakan's like, good. And you didn't kill them, right? And he's like, no, as per our agreement. He's like, good. If you did kill them, then we'd have a lot of trouble and you would be joining them soon after. And he's like, don't you threaten me. And he's like, oh, it's not a threat, but the prophecies have foretold that Hawk will ultimately kill Dove. Bah, bah. I don't care. This issue started off on a bad foot with the dance scene because that was just so completely what, why, how. But then you continue on to a thing of like, here's some guy who can't do anything but speak in one-liners. And then some other random this is an issue of poor seating. The only thing that comes back to the previous arc that we already set up was maybe this has something to do with the circle, but it doesn't. I know it doesn't. So, yeah, no, it's just, it's so unnecessary. It's so just completely like, all right, we just, like, for these comics that got canceled at issue 8, I just wonder why, if they didn't have more story to tell, they didn't just cancel them at issue 6. Like, clearly this is not something where it's like, oh, we're going to be able to wrap up this whole big prophecy of Hawk might kill Dove. But, like, I don't know. I'm just frustrated with this book. It's a very frustrating book because nobody acts like normal people should act. Everyone just does stupid macho stuff. Even Dove, who's supposed to be, like, the peaceful one, is just constantly like, I'm going to kick your ass, dude. All right, I give it a 3. I was about to say 4, but no, I give it a 3. And that's just, I'm so done with Hawk and Dove. I'm just, why was this a thing? God, I hate this. Static Shock number 7, written by Marc Bernardin, art by Scott McDaniel. We left off last issue with pretty much the end of the arc. Nothing significant really carries over. The only thing you need to know is that the sisters that were clones of each other came to terms and they coexist now. So this issue picks up with Static in medias res. He's fighting some giant robots and he's talking about, man, you think this is crazy. My day got even weirder as it went on. And then we just go back to 68 minutes earlier where Virgil and his two sisters, Sharon and other Sharon, are going to Star Labs because the Sharons, despite the fact they came to terms with each other, they do actually want to find out which one of them is the original. Just for their own peace of mind, I guess. And Virgil tells them, like, that doesn't really matter, right? And they're like, yeah, but we need something for this story. So they all go to Star Labs, and the security guy checks in Virgil, and he's like, Virgil, you're a pretty swell dude. You might be running this place one day. And Sharon comments, like, yeah, Virgil, do you think you might one day run this place and give up any other things that you're doing? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I know your secret as Static. And Virgil's like, maybe, but let me get through high school first. So they arrive at Dr. Lewis's lab, is the best I can say it. And basically the whole plan is that they're going to bombard the sisters with some different tests or whatever. And it will definitely 100% super show which of them is original. Or at least that they're different in some way. So then Static hears something and he's like, hey, you keep running the tests. I'm going to go check out what that is. And he sees the robots from the beginning of the issue terrorizing through the lab. He specifically says that if he puts a low-level charge through his uniform, it'll make him invisible to cameras, which I don't understand why that's necessary if he's in a costume anyway, but regardless, he does. And he sees the robots rampaging through. There's some scientists stuck in a fire, so he throws in a fire extinguisher and explodes it to save them. And the robots, through their rampage, end up collapsing this giant thing that was over top of the sisters. And the doctor says, like, look out. And only one of the sisters, like, reacts and pushes the other one out of the way. And she survives as well. They both survive. But as they sit there, they're like, wait a minute. We both heard him say, look out, but only one of us reacted. That must mean we're actually different. Which that doesn't mean that. And I don't, like, that's the flimsiest. It's a dumb plot line. Regardless, it's the end of it. So he's making his way through and fighting the robots, but the electricity's bouncing off because they're just made for military grade. So I guess they're impervious to electrical attacks. And so he rethinks his battle plan, and he turns them into electromagnets to the point where they collapse in on themselves, and that's the end of that. So he goes to a computer terminal that launched them, and he finds out that they were programmed by some dude who just walked in here and is also wearing a costume and programmed to go crazy. So now he has to find that dude. And he goes through the Star Labs and he uses some techno mumbo jumbo to find out where the guy is. And he gets a call from his crush who's asking for help on trig homework. And he's like, yo, what up, girl? And he's like, oh, can you help me with my homework? He's like, I'm a little busy. How about I call you back, baby? And he's like, are you serious? Yep, talk to you soon. Click. And then we just never get back to that either. So that's a thing. So we see this safe room that even Static can't get into. The guy's inside of it, and he grabs this device, whatever it may be, and then phases through the bottom of the floor. So Static busts through the floor and starts giving chase, just blasting through walls while he's just walking through them. And he gives his name as Phase, P-H-A-Y-Z-E, the Master of Density. And Static puts up a electric cage around him, and he's like, are you serious? Like, no, that's a stupid name. He's like, psh, whatever, nothing you could do to stop me. But then Static immediately, changes the charge of his molecular structure, therefore making it so he can't phase. And then that's it. He stopped him. So Static throws a punch and asks him, oh, is it really worth stealing it, whatever this thing is? And he's like, I was hired to steal that by a starving African village. That thing can make water out of thin air by combining hydrogen and oxygen. And they paid me all of their money to do it. And he's like, are you telling me you're some kind of Robin Hood? And he's like, no, they paid me. And I am just a thief. But it is for a good cause, right? And so Static calls up Hardware. And he's like, hey, Hardware, you built this thing, right? And this guy, he's stealing it and says it's for some starving African village to give them water. Is it cool if he takes it? And Hardware's like, yeah, sure, I got another one in the back room. And Static just goes, all right, here you go, kid. But you better take it where you say you're taking it. Otherwise, I will be back for you. And then that just wraps up. So Static goes talk to his sister and be like, hey, you guys get any answers on your test? And they're like, not really, but we got all the answers we needed. Yep. And then later that night, Sharon, and not other Sharon, but Sharon comes into the room to talk to Virgil. Was like, hey, did you go all Static Shock today? And Stac's like, close the damn door if you're gonna just out with it, Jesus. And she's like, why do you be Static? Like, why do you take all those risks or whatever? And he explains how mom and dad raised him to always try his best, and his best is being a superhero, so why would he do anything less? And then the issue just ends. Okay, like, fine for a one-shot, it's fine. You just, yeah, phase, cool, whatever. It's a good enough thing of, it's an actual, like, all right, is it okay for a bad guy to do a good thing via bad methods? Like, do the results cancel it out? I don't know. It's a good question to ask. This story barely asked it, but it was done well enough. My major problem with it is the entire Sharon thing of, I feel like Static works at Star Labs. We didn't have to have any reason for him to get there. He could just be there. But it feels like they felt there had to be some sort of reason Static was there in the first place. And it's like, no, he works there. Just let him be there. Why did we have to do this Sharon thing? It turned out to be nothing. It's annoying. I'm going to give this a 4. And a lot of that just comes down to the fact of the writing. The art is fine. It's nothing too bad. But, like, I'm really pissed off about... Because I've always been pissed off about that Sharon thing. And just when they finally had the chance to drop it and just say, oh, now they're pretty much just twin sisters. It's like, no. But, like, actually, though, what if Clone Saga? Shut up. Shut up. Animal Man number 7, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Travel Foreman and Steve Pugh. We left off last issue with the family hopping in an RV and fleeing the rot so that they can go get the help of Alec Holland, aka Swamp Thing. And this issue, they're still in the RV, making it cross country. We get opening and throughout the issue a couple shots of places throughout Utah of people who are attacked by the rot-infected woodland critters from last issue, and it's always played up as a horrifying thing of, a couple grizzly bears and wolves just showing up at your door. So, yeah, that happens throughout Utah. And then also driving through Utah is, of course, the family who, they're like, okay, so our talking cat, Socks, says that we should go down to Louisiana and find Swamp Thing. And I agree. But maybe we can make a pit stop over in Central City because the Flash is there, and he might be of some help because I met him once, and the Justice League could probably help us. And Ellen's like, yeah, you think the Justice League is going to help us? They're all fighting aliens or whatever. And Cliff chimes up like, hey, before my phone died, turns out Central City still had a power outage because of the events of Flash 1 through 6. And Buddy's like, well, then why don't you make us a map of places we can go to if your phone's so cool? And it's like, because it's out of batteries, Dad. And Ellen gets fed up with their bickering and all their stupid ideas and says, like, all right, look, we'll park. There was a town a couple miles back. You guys go down there, get charging cables for his phone, and some food for us to eat. Actual food, not junk food. Also cat food as well. And Socks says, not the cheap, dry stuff. So they're walking back to the town, and Cliff is a little bit upset that his dad isn't letting him fly like he does with Maxine. But he's like, oh, well, we're laying low for right now, Cliff. Like, just, I will when we're done with all this. So he goes and makes a call to the detective, like the police back home, to let them know that the detective was killed and, is dead. And Cliff goes into the convenience store to buy some food. As he gets up to the counter with all the food, he looks over and outside the window and starts checking out a couple of girls who are outside. And as he walks out, he sees one of them is wearing an Animal Man t-shirt, like literally the cover to issue number 1. And it says Evolve or Die on it, which I don't know how that works in story because there was definitely no time for them to do branding. But regardless, he comes up and he's like, hey, Animal Man's my dad. And they're like, yeah, okay. And Superman is mine. Like, cool. And they're like, no, really, my dad, he's Animal Man. And they're like, yeah, sure. Aren't you like 12? Like, how old are you, kid? And on cue, as they're like starting to belittle Cliff a little bit, Buddy comes up and he's like, there you are, Cliff. The Justice League needs us. Let's go. And he grabs Cliff and then flies off. And Cliff is like, thank you so much for making me look cool in front of those girls, Dad. So then we cut back to the RV, and it's Maxine, Ellen, and Ellen's mom. And they're playing cards. And Ellen's mom is like, Maxine, it's pretty scary, the things that happen to you and your daddy. It's okay to be scared. And she's like, I'm not scared. I mean, yeah, those bad things are in the red place, but the red place is my home. And they're gone. And now I'll be able to sense them when they're coming. And immediately Ellen's mom was like, no 4-year-old should ever have been put through this. Your husband, talking to Ellen, your husband has been horrible for you and your family. And of course, on cue, he walks in and she storms out. And it turns out Cliff got nothing but junk food, so punchline to joke. Later on that night, everyone's asleep, and Buddy wakes up and looks around, and nobody's there. Everyone's gone. And as he steps outside to find them, he sees that the earth is just in ruins with skulls and bones and flies and thunder and lightning. And as he looks around, he sees Seth, which I believe was a Swamp Thing reveal. So it's weird that he's over here as well. Again, you really got to read both books at once. And the rest of the Huntress 3 are in there, and he's like, yep, this is the earth. We took it over. Ha, 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 ha. And then a slightly older Maxine and Swamp Thing come in, and they're like, Dad, what are you doing here? And they start trying to fight the rot. And then behind them, I believe, are Constantine and Ellen. And Constantine starts talking to Buddy, and it's just like, hey, this is the future. Have you not figured that out yet? Like, this is what happens because you didn't protect Maxine. You didn't let her be able to learn about her powers and become the protector that she needs to be. And as they're saying that, Maxine is captured by one of the hunters and is infected with the rot. And as Buddy comes up to try to save her, her eyes just fling open and she turns into one of those grotesque looking monsters, which then shoots him awake. He's up and he looks over and Maxine is standing right next to him, just staring him down. It's just like, Daddy, the bad things are coming. And he's like, what? Who? Huh? Oh, okay. Everyone just stay inside. I'm going to go out and check. I'm sure that everything out there is not that bad. And of course, as soon as he goes outside, who is it but all the woodland critters here to attack the group? Hell of a start of an arc. It doesn't particularly feel that different to the arc that we just had. Like, it just feels like a natural continuation of it. So it's not really a clear delineation between where one stops and where one ends, but it is still good. It's still telling a great story that I am very invested in, and I'm loving these characters and how they all interact, and just the creepiness of it, the horror of it. It's very well done. It perfectly manages to balance humor and horror. It's just a masterclass. I really do enjoy it. I'm going to go ahead and give this one an 8.5. The only reason why it's lower than what it sounds like I'm pitching it as is because this is still just kind of setting up to where we're going next. It's not exactly its own particular thing. Like, it's just setting up a little bit of family drama, a little bit of, okay, let's all just take a second. We'll get some food. We'll do some other stuff. We'll set up, like, his worries about his daughter and stuff like that. But the actual action and forwarding of the plot is going to take place soon. This isn't that issue. So that's the only reason it's a bit lower than maybe it should be, but it's still fantastic. Art is great, and I cannot speak any more highly of it than I have over the past 6 months. Swamp Thing number 7, written by Scott Snyder, art by Yanick Paquette. We left off last issue with Alec Holland being stabbed through the chest by a chainsaw, and Abby Arcane being taken in by the Rots as their queen in a very grotesque manner. So, yeah, things ain't going so hot. And this issue is basically more of a conversation, more of like just a verbal beatdown than it is a story. But regardless, it opens with Alec reliving his previous death as well as his current one, just thinking of how similar they are and how every part of him is screaming out. Everything is screaming for it all to stop, and he just wants relief. But this time something is different, something's wrong, because all of the screaming and pain, it doesn't stop. And then we see Alec has been mentally teleported into the Parliament of Trees, which is on fire, mind you. And they just lay into him. They were like, Alec, you failed so hard. Like, you could not have been a worse avatar choice if, like, we literally picked someone from the Rot. You are the worst. And Alec is like, well, I can stop it. Just change me into Swamp Thing. I'm ready now. And it's like, we can't do that. No, dude, we do not have the power to do. We are on fire. All of this is over. We have lost. The green is done. Good job, dickweed. So basically, the Parliament's plan is we are going to teleport you in here. You're going to have to watch us burn. And then you'll be released back to your body just as they are cutting you open. Like you are going to die. And he basically rolls into, like, all you had to do was just be Swamp Thing. But instead, you decided to fall in love with that little witch. And she's like, don't call her that. That's my girlfriend. It's like, what do you want me to say? She is literally the queen of the rot. She is being brought there to be the queen. And he's like, she's not going to do that. She's different. She's special. And it's like, oh, yeah, she's special. Yeah, she's just going to ignore her entire destiny. And Alec's like, I did. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, you did. Congratulations. And look where it got us. You did it because you were scared. He's like, I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared of that. Being scared of Swamp Thing. No, I saw you guys. The first time through, I thought plants were docile, and I thought that they were something to be admired because they didn't have the wars of people or animals or whatever. But no, you guys are just as cutthroat. You're all just as awful. But the difference is you don't even have a conscience about it. That's why you wanted me. That's why you needed a human to be your avatar. Because I had things that you guys don't. And you have forgotten over your many centuries of being here. He's like, yeah, okay. Good job, Alec. Yeah, you're totally right. That's exactly why. Little too late. So, yep, we're all going to die. And we see Alec is starting to just drip blood across his entire body. Because, again, it's like Inception. You know, you die one layer up, then you're just slowly dying the layer down. And he's like, okay, you need to change me into Swamp Thing. And he's like, oh, were you not listening to the entire past conversation? We can't. We are physically too weak. And he's like, yes, I understand that. But in my bag, I have some of that bio-restorative formula that like kickstarted it last time. It should be enough to kickstart it this time if you just break it and use it. Just do it. And the trees are like, all right, well, yeah, that could work. All right, but here's the deal. Even if we did that, we're still going to die. You will be Swamp Thing again, but you're not going to have a parliament of trees to help you, and you're going to lose. Like, there's no way you can defeat the entire Rot army. And he's like, just do it already. Just turn me. They're like, you're never going to be human again. You understand that? Like, this is for realsies this time. And he's like, yes, do it. For the love of God. And he's like, well, we're very proud of you for doing this for the sake of the green. He's like, I am not doing this for the sake of the green. I am doing this for her. And so it breaks the vial on top of Alec, and it turns him into Swamp Thing the same way we saw before. He's being completely overtaken by vines and leaves and such that get into every orifice of his body through his veins, and he becomes the monster. But this time something is different, and we see the Rot starting to run away from Swamp Thing, but he extends out his hand, and out of his fingernails come some sharp branches which just impale the heads of each of the Rot. And as he stands there, he sprouts branches off of his back, which very quickly turn into leaves, which very quickly turn into wings. And Swamp Thing just actually literally flies off on Angel's wings, saying that things are different because this time it was my choice. And now, Rot, I will show you war. And that's where it ends off. Here's the thing. I think I might have been a little bit skeptical at the beginning of this because the fact that we were keeping him as Alec Holland instead of just turning him into Swamp Thing felt like they were just saving it for some big end reveal of like, oh, look, and now he's Swamp Thing. Wow. But I honestly feel that this made it work. This made it feel like a story that could not be told with him as Swamp Thing. He had to be Alec Holland to then make that decision and do something, like to actually act instead of just be this sort of passive, like, force of nature. Like, it's so well done. It is so well done. And of course, I've said this a dozen times, but if you're not reading Animal Man, it ties in very well with this entire series. But I love this Rot green red dynamic. It's very well told. It's an epic story for like, and I'm not even exaggerating, that is an epic story being told between the two books. And I am so looking forward to where this goes from here now that we have an actual literal Swamp Thing who's able to control the green. Like, how is he going to be able to use that to stop the rot? And he's already lost a lot, so it doesn't seem like he has very much more to lose, and that makes him very dangerous as a person. So I'm super interested in this. It's a great end to this trade. It's just this one thing here. If you didn't know the Rot War continued on, this one trade would be a perfect just Alec Holland story. Not even Swamp Thing story, just an Alec Holland story, which I don't really think those exist. So I'm very happy that that does. So yeah, no, great story. I'm giving it an 8. And the only thing that really brings it down is the fact that it is pretty much just a verbal beatdown. There's not a whole lot of real plot progression to it, except for he becomes Swamp Thing. Like, it's more of just let's talk about all the things we've learned in the past 6 issues, which is fine. It's like I said, very well told. So yeah, no, very, 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 very impressed by this story. Huntress number 6, the end of the miniseries, written by Paul Levitz and Marcus Toe. Last issue we left off with her killing the dictator guy who was, awful the entire way through. And this issue kind of just feels like an epilogue, for lack of a better word. It's just kind of winding down the story, and it doesn't quite feel as big as the last one. But regardless, we open up on the son of the man who was killed in the last issue. And he is outraged that his father has been murdered. And he's talking to an Italian ambassador who is supposed to be the one keeping him safe. But the ambassador just starts making excuses of like, well, he surrounded himself with Moretti. And he's like, Moretti? Are you kidding me? This is all of that superhero's fault, that woman. And she's going to come after more and more people. What do we have on her? And the ambassador pulls out all these files of pictures they took on her, including some in her civilian gear. And they're like, oh, well, we'll get her soon, sir. We'll soon have an arrest. And he's like, arrest? I don't want her arrested. I want her killed. I'm putting a bounty on her head. Get the word out. 1 billion euros for whoever kills this woman. And so then we cut over to Helena. She's just driving down the road, not a care in the world. And she gets to a police checkpoint ahead. And obviously they're looking for her, and she's not willing to stick around to get caught, even if she doesn't know why they're looking for her. So she gets out of her car, but the moment she does, police start storming up to her. She fights them off and uses her belt to zip line down a power line down to a nearby dock where she steals some guy's boat and drives away. And she immediately calls up her reporter friend who's like, hey, so Huntress, whoever that may be, has a €1 billion bounty on her head, and maybe we shouldn't be talking on phones that might be tapped by the NSA because that's kind of a big deal. And she's like, yeah, all right, I get it. Who do you know who did this? And he reveals that it's Hassan, the son of the man. And she's like, oh, well, that is interesting. I guess I'll take care of this. Click. And then we cut to later on that night where she's describing how breaking into a fortress is... Every fortress has a weak spot. If you know where to look. For instance, Hassan's fortress was built with the assumption that nobody would dare climb up a many 100-foot sheer cliff rock face in order to get to it. And yet here's Huntress doing that thing. And as she gets up to the top, there are a couple of sewage grates that she says, it's like, okay, well, one of you got to leave me inside. She reaches one that is literal actual sewage, and she's like, nope, let's try again. And then she gets to a second one that is a rainwater drain, maybe even some pool chlorine. So she jumps into that one. And we cut to a couple of guards who are walking around a pool just like, man, what are we... just wasting time out here. No one's going to try to break into this place. And as one of them looks over into the pool, Huntress just jumps out and grabs him. And we can presume a giant fight scene happened afterwards, but we don't get to see that because we cut to the next morning as Hassan wakes up. He takes off his sleep mask, and Huntress is just sitting there in his room with a crossbow trained at him. And Hassan immediately is like, you killed my father, a noble man. He's like, your father was a dickweed who imprisoned women and tortured them. Shut up. And immediately Hassan drops it. He's like, I'm not my father. Please don't kill me for his sins. I can drop the bounty. I can free the women. Just name it. Just spare my life. And she's like, okay, here's the deal. you are going to free all of the women. Anybody who's ever been involved in your trafficking, you are going to get them free. Additionally, you're never going to traffic ever again. If I find out you have, I will come back here and kill you. However, you can go ahead and keep the bounty on my head. Keeps things interesting for me. But if nobody's cashed it in a year, I want you to take $2 billion and donate it all to an abused women charity. Okay? Cool? And if you don't, remember, I'll kill you. And then she jumps out the window, and that is literally the last we see of it. Then we pick up at a airport where I guess she's being spotted, and she's on the run from a bunch of security guards. And they're shooting at her, and she's running away, and she's like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have kept that bounty on me, but nah, it keeps things fun. And as she's running across one of the rooftops of the airport, the door flings open, and who's standing in the doorway but Karen Starr, a.k.a. Power Girl? And she's like, hey, I've been over in Mr. Terrific for like 3 issues. Now I'm here. And she grabs Huntress, and they both fly off to a private jet, and then they say, well, we've both been busy, haven't we, partner? And then there's a little thing at the bottom that says, join us for World's Finest, which I guess is going to be the follow-up series to this book, which I don't know when that's coming out. Like I said, this feels more like an epilogue than it does an actual continuation of the story, because going from the chairman with his multiple guards and a safe room and all this cool like attack on like a vault sort of story, that felt like a big climax. And this one just felt like, all right, well, we're just gonna, we left a loose thread with the sun, so now we're just gonna deal with that now. It kind of feels like a step down, which sucks in terms of it being the last issue, but hey, if they had to do 6 issues, then okay, they had to do 6 issues. I like the reveal at the end. I think that's a decent way to say like, oh, did you like Huntress? There will be more coming ahead, rather than just being some amorphous like, they'll show up eventually maybe, who knows. So overall, for this specific issue, ignoring the miniseries as a whole, I'd have to probably give this one a 6, because again, it dips down in the stakes built up from the last issue. But I do still like it. It's just not a punchy enough ending, you know? The ending is literally just, okay, don't do bad things, bye. And that's it. So it's just kind of just like, all right, we could have had more, but I can't hold it that much against it because it's still a decent ending. So 6 for this, and overall a decent miniseries. If you're interested in Huntress at all, I'd say give it a check. It's a decent enough read, and it's a story that focuses solely on her. So yeah, pretty good. Night Force #1, written by Marv Wolfman, art by Tom Mandrake. This is a new miniseries, and just full disclosure, it's one of those like magic-based series that asks questions first and answers nothing later. So I'm very confused by a lot of it, but I'm going to do my best to get through this. So we open up on a woman being drowned, and as she's being drowned, she sees these grotesque figures of like an alien baby and these horrifying looking women and a giant ram skull headed creature. And then we just go away from that. And we meet up with a man named Duffy, who is a police officer, and he's leaving for the morning to, he stops by the mantle and says how he's going to try to make his dad proud. And as he gets in the car, he gets a call from, I assume, dispatch saying that there's a mugging going on down by a beach. And as he gets down there, we see the opening scene of the woman being drowned, and Duffy gets over there and saves the woman, but the mugger gets away, and Duffy's like, all right, well, we're going to take you to the hospital. You're going to be fine. We get one panel of some sort of creepy red room with like surveillance going on, and says Winters must have learned about the girl, but he certainly doesn't know about Simon or why or how she's important. So I don't know what that means. Regardless, we get to this big old creepy mansion and a guy inside who we will find out later is named Baron Winters, and his pet leopard Merlin. And he's chastising Merlin because he's reading Merlin's Book of the Night. Yes, it's just a book written by a leopard, I guess, and it has the name of this woman, Zoe Davis, and like her history, and apparently it's not nearly as detailed as he'd like. But he walks through his mansion and he's like, well, 2 of the new members of our new night force have met up, which means the last one will join shortly, and then one of them will die. But that happens. And then he mentions something about a woman named Vanessa, who may or may not be alive or dead. It's hard to tell, but Winters is certainly upset by it. And he says how he's not even sure what side he's supposed to be on, but regardless, they have to get ready. And then we see the follow-up of Zoe in the hospital getting treated, and Duffy calls back dispatch and was just like, how did you know that thing was gone? She was being drowned. Like, how did you know that 18 minutes beforehand? And they were like, we didn't call you. Like, nobody here called you. And he's like, but what? And so he goes and talks to Zoe, trying to get some answers as to what's going on. Zoe is still seeing the skull-faced monsters in her eyes, and as she's about to be killed by one, she snaps out of it and asks Duffy where she is. And then we see the woman who supposedly called Duffy, at least Duffy thinks she did. She's like, okay, there, I called him and then I denied it. Are we good? And he's like, nah, you promised me 3 favors. And it turns out on the other side of the phone is Baron Winters. So he's playing both sides, I guess. So he always comes out on top. And regardless, Duffy's talking to Zoe and he's just trying to get answers like, do you know why you were attacked? Also, what are you talking about monsters? That doesn't make any sense. And as Zoe's being escorted out of the room, because I guess she's just fine now, puts in a wheelchair because, I think you have to do that for hospital policy. But as they walk through the door, they end up on the other side, inside Baron Winters' manor, called Winter's Gate Manor. So that's a thing. And they're kind of freaked out for a second, but then as soon as they start talking, an alarm starts going off, and Baron Winters is like, okay, hold that thought. You guys stay here. I'll be right back. And as soon as they start making their way through, Duffy's like, okay, we're going to go because this is creepy. And so he's like, yeah, no, I agree. So they start moving through the mansion, and as soon as they enter into one of the doors, they're attacked by these shadow monsters, which can actually scratch them and hurt them. And there isn't really much that they can do about it. Duffy's just screaming, stay away from us. And as soon as Baron Winters hears this, he busts in and he's like, get out of here. Go on, get. And he uses some light magic to, banish them. And Duffy and Zoe are like, what the hell's going on? And Baron Winters is like, it beats me, but I'm going to find out. And at that point, 2 FBI agents named Henry Ito and Edward Corbin bust in. And apparently some serial killer came into this house. Or at least they tracked him here, and they need to have a look around. And Baron Winters is like, excuse me? No. And he's like, don't worry, just wait here. It'll only be a minute. And he waits for all of 7 seconds and then just follows them out. He goes with Merlin, and they sniff out that, yes, the serial killer actually is in the house. And he's dead, and it looks like he's been drained of all life. But as soon as Baron Winters starts investigating, the FBI come up behind him and is like, I thought we told you to stay put. And then they start listing off that Baron Winters has some huge rap sheet that is basically all linked to suspicions of using psychotherapy mumbo jumbo or something to con people out of huge sums of money. And he's like, well, all you have are suspicions and you don't have a warrant. So get the hell out of my house. And they're like, all right, fine, but we will be back. And we take the body with us as they carry out the serial killer. And immediately, Duffy and Zoe are like, those guys didn't seem legit. And it's like, yeah, no, they're not FBI. I don't know what they are, but they're definitely not FBI. So Duffy then points a gun at Winters. He's like, all right, time to give us some answers. And Winters straight up just tells him, your entire life has been consumed by whatever is happening to that girl right now. Your life, your father's life before you. And Duffy's like, what do you know about my papa? Then we cut to West Virginia, where a senator is about to give a speech, but he is having a cluster headache in the car, so he's trying to get over that before he gives the speech. And then this red surveillance room sees some woman in the crowd who, quote, sees him and has some crazy-ass, devil eyes. And then she makes her way back to her car. There's just a panel in here of some complete other guy just asking an assistant how they did on their speech. And then the woman from before gets back into her car, and then she's immediately eaten by some giant tooth monster. And we're just done with that sequence. So then we cut to that night, I guess. Duffy and Zoe go to a motel where they spend the night separately, of course. And Duffy makes some calls saying, like being all sneaky, saying like, hey, I called you about earlier. Yeah, make sure you get on it, but stay secret about it. And as soon as he hangs up, he says, I've been looking for you a long time, Zoe. And then that's it. It's just one of those series that like is setting up all of its big like mystery things right here, right now, and then we'll slowly get the unraveling over time, and that's fine, but that doesn't help me understand anything that's going on. Pretty much since the back half, like as soon as the FBI enter, like before that, I thought I got it. I thought I understood. But as soon as the FBI or the fake FBI enter, I'm immediately lost. And I have no clue what's going on with any part of the story. So maybe we'll get something eventually. I don't know how the series is going to turn out. But for this particular issue, I'm going to have to give it a 5, straight down the middle average, because it's just, I don't know what it's doing. It may turn out to be great. It may turn out to be awful. I don't understand this issue, but I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt because it is the first issue of the series. But if I was just a comic book reader and I read this by itself, I would not be coming back for issue 2. Unfortunately, I'm beholden to, so we'll see it when we get there. And that's it. That's all the comics from DC Comics this March 7th, 2012. And like I said, it was a doozy with 15 of them, so I got to kind of move a little bit fast here. However, unfortunately for me, next week is also a doozy because instead of 15 comics, DC decided to put 16 comics all on one week. Hooray! So let's take a look at what we've got on March 14th, 2012. We have the number 7 issues of Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Batwoman, Superboy, Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Legion Lost, Demon Knights, Frankenstein, and Resurrection Man. Additionally, we have the final issues of My Greatest Adventure and The Ray, number 6 and number 4 respectively. And wrapping it all up, we have the number 6 issue of The Shade, which is smack dab in the middle of that series. So yeah, that's a lot. And I got to start reading that. So let's just wrap up the show right here, right now. Twitter, at DC Comics Podcast. Patreon, Mild Fuzz TV, all one word for both of those. Talk to me, give me some money, whatever you want to do. But that will be me. And always remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.